Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Norris, and I am the Walter Havighurst Professor of Russian History and Director of the Havighurst Center for Russian and Post-Soviet Studies at Miami University in Ohio. And this is the next installment of the Creative Horizons ongoing collaboration with Arizona State University's Meilkian Center and the University of South Florida's Institute on Russia. This series spotlights art and artists in the former Soviet world. So far, we've had Victoria Lomasko, Vladimir Tsesler, Szabolcs Kispal, and Ermina Takhanova. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Kateryna Babkina, a Ukrainian poet, prose author, columnist, screenwriter, and playwright. She's the author of several books of poetry, including Painkillers and Sleeping, several collections of short stories, including Happy Naked People, a novel named Sonia, a novel and short stories, My Grandfather Danced Better Than Everyone, and several children's books, including Hat and Whale. Her work has been translated into Hebrew, Polish, German, English, Swedish, French, Czech, Spanish, Romanian, Serbian, and Russian, and plays based on her texts have been staged in Kyiv, Vienna, and Geneva. Just last week, Kateryna received not one but two prizes at the prestigious Angelus Central European Literature Awards, one for the best translation of her new novel and stories into Polish, and one selected through a reader's poll. So it's my pleasure to welcome you, Kateryna. Thank you for submitting a video for this series, and thank you for agreeing to participate in this live Q&A session.
Thank you very much for having me here, and it's a pleasure to meet you all, to see you all. I'm looking forward for your questions. Also, I'm not very good in English pronunciation, so in case you cannot understand what I have said, please make me know and ask me again, so I will try to explain better.
Well, in your video you made for the series, you actually planted several seeds. Thank you very much for me to ask you questions. So here's the chance, I think, to watch them sprout a little bit. So first, right away, you start by noting that you teach inspiration, and that inspiration, in fact, can be taught. So tell us how, and how do you get would-be writers and artists inspired? What goes into a class of inspiration?
That is super easy. To learn inspiration, you basically need to learn two things. First is you have to know what inspires you. Not Kateryna Babkina, not Stephen Norris, not whoever, not Barack Obama, not Sonia Lubomirsky, not Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, whoever else. You have to learn what inspires you. And second, you have to know how to implement this in your daily life, in your daily routine. So you know what inspires you and you do this. And therefore, when I teach, I give people different instruments to try. And then when they check if that works with them, we are trying to find a way to implement that in their daily life. That sounds very short, but in fact, it demands a lot of work with yourself, a lot of knowledge of yourself, of your life, of your aims, a lot of careful and honest understanding of how do you live, what do you want, etc. But more or less, it looks like this.
So in your video, you read your short story, The Ruby, and I always enjoy hearing authors read their own work. And it's from that collection, My Grandfather Dances Better Than Anyone Else. A great title for any compilation. And the story is itself a commentary on the importance of stories. In it, the Ruby acts as a device that prompts storytelling from anyone who sees it, and that forces almost everyone who sees it to think about their own stories. And I love how in the story, the Ruby winks at people because it prompts them to tell stories. So speaking of inspiration, what was the inspiration behind this story and one you hinted at in your video?
The thing is that once upon a time, a magazine asked me to write a story, and it was like, you know, Harper's Bazaar, like a glance fashion magazine. And they knew what do I write, and they knew my stories can often be cruel, can often be like, how to say, not some romantic or light reading. So they especially asked me to make it not very cruel, not very hard on people, just something what's used, you know, for Harper's Bazaar. And so was the plan, but something got, I wanted to write a story about the jewel. about the ring with the ruby that we do have in the family, and that does have the story behind it. But probably I wasn't at the beginning considering this story to be this kind of story, but something went wrong when I realized that they want a story for the May issue. And in May, all the world commemorates the surrenders of the Nazi Germans, and only post-Soviet countries celebrate the day of victory. So when the whole world remembers somebody who was murdered, we celebrate, which is kind of wrong a little bit, I would say. So that was something that actually turned the story into the direction it went. And then while writing all the story, I realized I have more this kind of stories, and those are the stories of my friends, of their parents, their uncles, their neighbors, and it's an important part of our, how to say, spoken heritage, something that because normally, generally, if you're Ukrainian, you don't have much of the family archive. No paper saved because there were communists, so you'd better like close and hide your origin, or you were deported or arrested again in the Soviet era, so everything was erased. Then probably you were rehabilitated, so again then the KGB things were like erased from the history. Now also the part of the country is in war, so just the places and the papers are burned. And also after the Holocaust events, some of the archives and papers were gone, as generally after the Second World War. So normally a lot of us are only having the story of their families in this kind of spoken stories that pass from grandfather to grandfather, from grandfather to us. And that is how we also gonna transfer this memory, by telling the stories, by writing, by making music, painting, making films, and so on. So that is what was the inspiration for the story and for the book, because while I was working on the story for the magazine, I figured out the whole book.
And you mentioned in the video that the publisher ended up not publishing the story. So you were inspired because the Harper's Bazaar contacted you to write this story, and then they didn't publish it. So there's a story behind that story too.
Harper's Bazaar published the story, but then when I figured out it's gonna be the book, I sold the rights. And there was a publishing house willing to buy the rights. They saw the description of the book, they saw the first story, they said it's okay, it's cool. Then I got the money, they got my promise, and after actually after my stay in Iowa, I came back, I finished the book, and I sent them the book. And there is one story in this book, Sugar, which contains the story of the homosexual contact of one guy and another guy. And the story actually is not about this, about not like two male people having sex. It's about how lost can the person be, that he is looking for himself in all the possible situation, and he constantly demands everything from himself. And finally, he gets only relieved when he finds the person who doesn't demand from him anything at all, who is very easygoing. So it's not even about that, but they told me like, you cannot publish a book about the homosexual people. That was like, excuse me, because it was like 2019 and I wasn't ready for this kind of things. Like, what do you mean you cannot publish this kind of book? Luckily, the contract was written in a way that it wasn't mentioned what happens if they don't publish a book. I was obliged to deliver the book on time, so I did. And yeah, they just didn't publish it, and they sold it to another publishing house. So it kind of, they punished themselves for their homophobia, but
and a literary award or two later, they're probably
but yes, but I wonder because what they wanted from me at the beginning is just to exclude that one story, keep the whole book, but just throw the one story away. And now I wonder how many more publishers are demanding things like that from other writers, and probably some of the writers do or not. I don't really know, but it was important for me to stay stubborn and to keep the book as it was.
So as you suggested, the Ruby and all the stories in the collection are about complicated family histories, also intertwined histories of Ukraine, the past, the memories that get told and retold, the trauma of the 20th century, the pain of the 20th century. And you've noted that these themes run throughout your work and many of your contemporaries. And related to the publisher's reaction to your first story, have you received any backlash from readers or other publishing houses to the way you recount these painful histories? And I'm thinking especially in the Ruby, the way that you tell both the stories of trauma inflicted on Ukrainians and on Ukrainian Jews during the Holocaust.
Normally people like it. And all the publishers from different countries who have bought the rights so far do like it and do love it, because as you said at the beginning, the whole book, it's very, very thin. It's a very small book. I wasn't smart enough to get it ready to show to you, but it's really the tiny one. And what it does to people, as you just have told, it makes you thinking about your own stories, because it contains those like 10 stories, and at least one of those stories everybody can say that, oh, that happened also in my family, like to my grandfather, to our neighbors, to my aunts. And those stories are so much about people, about the readers, that normally everybody likes it.
So how did you decide to throw in a magical element to the story and to other stories? I mean, the Ruby winks at people. There's a witch in the story. It's very evocative.
It's not really a witch though, but I enjoy this very much as a reader, so I do this as a writer as well. Also, this magic way of perceiving reality helps a lot when you go through the difficult times. We all do this. We all, in a way, give the magical meaning to the things. Like we all expect for the signs when we need some support, some extra support, some support we don't probably get from people, from ourselves, from the situation. Then we look for something like, if the light turns green now, they're gonna be good. If the next 5 cars in front of me gonna be white, I gonna get the job. If whatever else, then probably something else. Give me a sign, dear Lord, here is your sign. We are looking for this sign, we are looking for these magic things, and why don't then we include this in the books? I like this. And
I should have listened to signs on Monday. Every sign told me to just stay in bed, and I ignored them. But nonetheless, including our near mix-up about when this conversation was going to take place. You mentioned also in the video the role of the Ukrainian diaspora. You reference writers based in Germany, Canada, the United States. You are based in Ukraine. How significant is the Ukrainian diaspora in contributing to contemporary Ukrainian literature? And are there differences between the way writers write about Ukraine who are based abroad and those who write about Ukraine based in Ukraine itself?
I wouldn't say like writers write about Ukraine, they write about life. They write about what happens to people, what they think about, what stories happen. They write about feelings, pains, dreams. They do write, of course, from the different perspectives, though the life is different in Ukraine and somewhere in Canada and somewhere in Germany, I don't know. But I think the good books are all about that common values that pretty much are all the same all over the world, just the human being values. So the writers write about this rather than about Ukraine. Though, of course, you can catch something like from the authors, let's say, who become from the immigrant families who were born already somewhere, not in Ukraine, but are trying to write about Ukraine. You can catch this perspective of, the imaginary land. And they sometimes describing something which is not already true, but had, like before, when their parents or grandparents used to live here. So they have this, imaginary Ukraine that exists only in their minds. On the other hand, when we like live in here and are writing about Europe or some other places, some other countries, where we did not really spend much time or spend sometimes like working in universities and staying at the residences or whatever else. And we also do write about imaginary lands and imaginary countries, in fact. But this, up to me, this is what literature is for.
One of the things.
No, this is this element of magic again. You combine what had happened, with something you had imagined, with something that never existed, and you build the whole story out of those different things. My English is killing me. Sorry, especially the Greek.
No, it's fantastic. It's far better than my Ukrainian.
Yeah, I can imagine.
One of the things
I'm always here to teach you a few words, if you need that.
Please. But one of the things, speaking of stories and back to inspiration, one of the things that strikes me so much about your work is how varied it is. You write in so many different genres: poetry, short stories, novels, children's book, even screenplays. So how do you decide what genre to write in, and how does it come from the inspiration, the story, and you think, oh, this is best in a short story, or this is best in a poetry? I mean,
kind of,
like
that. You have to cook the soup and you have to cut different stuff, like the carrot, the meat, the potatoes, and then the greeneries. Then you have to cut something else. So you are taking the thing, looking at it, and decide. You have some knives, and you deciding which one is going to be better. So you have the idea, because for me, the writing and also music, painting, film, wherever else, is about transferring the emotional experience. So the person reads something and lives through the story, which the person did not really live through in real world, but still the person feels the same things and come to some conclusions and get some knowledge and some emotional experience as the person would live through it. So you just have to choose the instrument. It is based first on the needs of the story, on the needs of the idea. Second, on the needs of your auditory, like to whom you want to talk, whom you want to involve in this experience. And also just on your pleasure, because you do get some pleasure when you write. So am I feeling like writing a poem tonight? Hell yes. Am I strong enough like now to start a new novel? Probably. Let's try. That's it.
Speaking of poetry, you just published a new book of poetry. So tell us a little bit about this book.
It looks good. Let me show you. Give me the second.
It does look good, yes.
It is. It is small. I don't like the big books. I don't write the big novels. Actually, my grandfather danced better than anyone. Is not much bigger. It's a really small books of super short stories. Yeah, and it's like the small book of poetry, almost a pocket book. I love the design. I love the cover, and I also love that you can find the bird inside. Ta-da! So this is the bird from the cover, and yeah, there are some 80 poems. I write this old style syllabotonic poetry, which sometimes is similar to hip hop. So I do enjoy the rhythm and the rhyme, and I suppose I know how to use those things. And yeah, so the first print, the first amount of books they publish, how do you say this in English?
First run, I guess, or the first
Yeah, the
printing.
first run is already sold, which also makes me enjoying it even more. So it's touchy enough, but it's also kind of a cruel poetry. I do use some simple language. I do use some street language. I do use something that is not considered to be like the language for the poetry. But I suppose that the real poetry must be close to daily life. And on the other hand, it always has to be beautiful. So together with all I have mentioned, I'm trying to write beautiful poetry. So I suppose the book is beautiful and simple at the same time. I hope so.
I hope it's translated or available for us here in the United States and elsewhere. I look forward to reading
Yeah,
it.
it's possible to find some of my poetry translated into English by Virlana Tkac and Wanda Phipps in some magazines and somewhere online as well. But there is no the whole book published yet.
I love this metaphor of how you cook. You think about cooking and how you cook up a story. And in the video, you mentioned the effects that the conflict with Russia and in Eastern Ukraine have had on Ukrainian literature. And you mentioned movingly that everyone now knows someone killed or injured in the war. So how has that external conflict and conflict within Ukraine affected your own writing? That is how you cook something up. What led you to write about it, like the story Richard the Chicken-Hearted, and how has it affected Ukrainian literature in general?
Where did you manage to find Richard the Chicken Heart?
Online, translated.
Yes, probably in Washington Square Review.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah. At some point, I have realized. Actually, when I was publishing my previous book of poetry, which was, I suppose, 2015, I never was planning, to write about war. I don't live there at the East. I went there like once with a volunteer team, and I was doing and keep doing some volunteering activity for the army also here in Kiev, but I'm not the one like really involved very much. I do also teach in some centers for veterans and so on, but it is not a big part of my life, to be honest. But at some point, actually, when I was finishing the book of poetry, I sent it to the friend of mine. He's also a writer, and he asked me, "What do you think? Like, what is this book about?" And I was like, well, about, life, responsibility, emotions, whatever else poetry book can be about. And he told me, I have to say you that it's a book about war. Look, there is war in every single poem, like as a metaphor, as an event at the background, as this something that you expect, you're afraid of, you memorize. It is present there all the time. Even when you speak about love, about sex, about dinner, about motherhood, about different things in your life that has nothing to do with war, you still speak about war. And I had to agree with him because that was true. And then I also finished the Happy Naked People, the book of short stories, and I realized that it's also like the book about the war. And then I went to Israel and for poetry reading, and I read some of the poetry, and there was a Hebrew translation. And then people in the audience would ask me like, You said you are not Jewish. How come you write so much about our situation like this on running war on the daily basis all the time? And I was like, whoa, 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 people, it's not yours war. Come on, it's ours war in the east of Ukraine. But and they said, oh, that sounded so much as our conflict with Palestine. And I understood that this is also this, like the experience we share with other people in the same situation as well.
Well, speaking of audience reactions, I think this is a good time to see if anyone out there in the audience has a question. If you do, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand or just unmute yourself and say you have a question. So I'll pause as we've been taught to do here on Zoom and count to 7 to see if someone does have a question to ask Kateryna. If not, I certainly have more. Maybe while people are thinking, oh, we have one. So we have one in the chat, and then maybe one person has unmuted themselves. So in the chat, there's a question asking, how do you deal with writer's block? Writer's
block is when you feel blocked and you cannot write, right?
Correct.
Or it's a big house where only writers live.
Well, that would be interesting, but
it's difficult to deal with. So the writer's block. I don't think I have ever experienced one. I have like 11 months old child. I can tell you how do I deal with the lack of sleep, with the lack of money, with the lack of personal time, with the lack of time in general, with the lack of silence, with the lack of space. If I turn my camera just a little bit, you will see a lot of baby stuff all around here. So how do I deal with the writer's block? I never was blocked from this, I suppose. I love writing. I don't expect much of writing. I suppose that the writing block comes to you when you have a lot of expectations on your writers. Like, I have to write an essay to get my points. I have to write a book so I become rich and famous and wherever else. Well, in Ukraine, all those things do not work normally. You don't earn much money with writing. It's almost impossible, though I have made it, but I'm too stubborn, and it's impossible to make a living out of writing. It's not something that you would expect being Ukrainian, because nobody translates from Ukrainian, nobody buys rights for Ukrainian books for the Hollywood blockbusters. So normally you cannot earn enough money with writing in Ukraine. So there is no reason to put any expectations on your writing. So I never did. I was writing poetry because I loved writing poetry. I tried to write a novel because I wanted to write a novel. I had a story to tell, and I was fascinated by the possibility to tell the story. I once wanted to write a Facebook post and didn't manage to make it short enough, so I wrote my first book for children. And then at some point I realized that it is working and I'm becoming the professional writer. And I was like, wow, so I can do the thing I really like to do and get money for it. Let's do this. So it doesn't bring you any blocks again. So I would say probably the first thing is like to realize what blocks you. You have to be honest with yourself and to give yourself an answer, like what are you afraid of, what you are trying not to do or not to get by feeling blocked. Then when you have an answer, the block might go away. And the other thing is not put any probably expectations on your writing. That would be probably my recipe to deal with a writer's block.
I envy you that you've never had it. And I wish I could say, speaking of going away, that the noises and distractions on your time caused by children will go away. They don't. I have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old. They just evolve in different ways. But
I know, yeah, everybody says that. But thank you for reminding me again.
Right. I think we had a couple people who were about to chime in with questions, and we have one more in the chat. So let's let people who were going to chime in and ask themselves go ahead. It looks like Irina perhaps was. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Kateryna, thank you for this lovely talk. I'm a bit of a fan of yours because I follow you on social media. And yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't read anything, but I am planning to read Migi Tańcował Klaszcze. And I have two questions, if I may. One, you're very present on social media. You put a lot of yourself out there. And I think, you know, maybe for a writer, it's necessary in today's day to sort of promote yourself and get as much of an audience as you possibly can. At the same time, it's also, you know, you're lowering your level of privacy and letting a lot of people sort of into your home, into your private life. How do you feel about that? And where do you draw the line? And my second question is, who do you read? What have been your literary influences? Which writers do you like? Who do you think has shaped you in some way, shape, or form in terms of your creative process? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina. Great questions. So the privacy thing is, I'm gonna tell you the story. Though you're having the storyteller here. When I was, oh God, 24, 25, and I published already 2 books or 3 books, I found out somebody had created an article on Wikipedia about Kateryna Babkina. What he wanted to do is they wanted to edit the article because person added some random information, and also the photo I didn't like, and also I really wanted at some point to remove my year of birth, so nobody knows how old am I. When you're 24, it matters somehow. Now I'm 37. Hello. And so I entered the Wikipedia, I registered, I tried to edit the article, and they told me, you are just registered an account with an email, Kateryna Babkina, Gmail something, and you also have the phone number registered as Kateryna Babkina and something else and something else. So we think you're Kateryna Babkina. We don't let you to edit the article about Kateryna Babkina on Wikipedia. It doesn't meet our ethics or something else. The story is about, I don't really think anything like, and also I was educated and I worked a lot as a journalist. So I know how to do the research. I know how to look for the information and how to track the information and how to, like, I know the basics, how, not the hacker or something else, but I know the basics, how to, you know, like use the technologies to know something about person. And I think there is no privacy. There is no privacy, and I'm totally okay with it. Like, there is safety. Nobody is entering my house. Nobody is being violent to me. Nobody is doing bad things to me. What about privacy? Like, nobody knows something about me. I always feel weird when somebody wants to hide a lot. Like, if the person, if, you know, like, if there is a rule in a company that the workers shouldn't discuss their salary, that means that somebody's rights are violated and the salaries are not equal. And something probably is wrong with it. So they are forbidden to discuss this. And if there are some societies which don't accept, like, discussing with people what is going on inside of the family, then probably some shit is going on inside of the families, like some violence, some disrespect, some different things. So also I do enjoy social medias because it takes time to I love, as you might have noticed, telling the stories, and it demands some time, you know, to publish the book, and it needs no time to post on Facebook. So you can create the story, you can use visual storytelling, you can combine and use this as an instrument. So mostly I use social media as a writer, but not for publicity or something, rather for extra writing, you know. all the things I write are not enough for me, so I write also in the social medias, and that's okay. And the second question, oh my God, what was it about?
Writers that you like, writers that influence you.
Oh, this is the least I can start, and I would never end. I'm a big fan of American literature. I'm a big fan of Fitzgerald, John Irving. I might misspell though surnames. I love and Taylor, Alice Munro, who's Canadian, but still. Then also from Ukrainian literature, I'm a big fan of Yuri Andrukhovich. Taras Prochasko is my super favorite one. Both poetry and prose of Sergei Zhadan, Tanya Malerchuk, Bogdana Matiyash, Mark Livin. I really love. One of my favorite books is David Copperfield. Yeah, another my favorite book is The Moby Dick. Again, I'm a big fan of different short stories like Edgar Keret, or there are also some like Ukrainian writers you probably don't know because they're not translated into any languages. I adore Bogdan Zadura, Polish poet, who's also my translator into Polish, but it's like the big poet. I'm lucky to get this kind of translator. I love also Martin Switlitsky, Walt Whitman. I'm a big fan of his poetry, then also Robert Frost. And I know it's a very random list, but I haven't prepared one because if I ever made a list of writers that had influenced me, it will start with, I have no idea, Bible, and never end at all. Like, and also, you know, they write new books. You only like finished with something, then you discover Sally Rooney, Celeste Ink, Donna Tartt again and again and again, and you only read everything. Hope she published the new one, and then
have you ever
read
Marilyn?
New and new books, and you are not able to read them all, but you keep loving them.
Have you ever read Marilyn Anderson? She's one of my favorite American writers.
I know the name, though I don't remember.
Read her, you love her.
Okay, let me write it down, the Marilyn Anderson. Thank you very much, Irina. And
Kateryna, on the video she created for the series, gave us a nice list of Ukrainian literature she recommends. So
I'll look for the video. Thank you very much. I didn't know.
Yeah, that was actually I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't feeling good that I read the whole story, so I took so much time on myself because my aim was to tell you more about Ukrainian literature, because we do suffer from the fact that we are a small language. Normally, nobody translates from Ukrainian because you have to know Ukrainian as a native. And you have to be English or Chinese or something else native speaker to translate. And you also have to be gifted in literature, so you're able to translate fiction. And there is not so much people who can do this from Ukrainian, unfortunately, but probably. So each time I get abroad, like I get to Iowa, to Poland, to Germany, to wherever else, I talk a lot about Ukrainian literature, that Ukrainian literature is interesting and rich and cool. So please, people, try to read, translate, get interested in us more.
Well, I'm part of 2 Ukrainian language reading clubs, and we read current Ukrainian literature, and we sometimes invite the authors to join us if they have time and if they're interested. And we're reading you in 2 months, so we may reach out to you.
With pleasure.
So that's fantastic. Connections being made here in the Creative Horizons series. We have 2 questions in the chat, and then maybe there's time for one more question from someone else out there. So let me ask the question in the chat. Do you write with a particular audience in mind, and how does your audience influence your work?
Good question. Thank you very much. Only when it comes to the books for children, then you have to consider audience. So because you have to relate on the experience the audience already have and can like understand, you have to use stories, words, and examples they would understand. And in the other cases, I rather think about the needs of the story and about the idea, about the emotions I want to make people feel. Do I think about the audience? Yeah, probably I do. I never want to hurt them too much because my writing sometimes is able to do things like that. So, and I also never want to lecture people, to teach them how to live. All I want from them is to live through some story and to get the experience, which I suppose can be beautiful, like almost every experience in life can be beautiful. That's it. And I see the other question about the translation.
Yeah. Have you ever considered translating your
Are
own?
you kidding? Can you hear my English? When I was in Iowa, I went to the translation workshop of Aron Ach, a great professor from Iowa University. And I was like, I'm gonna translate my own story. And I tried, and they were like really understanding master's translation students from different languages into English, and me struggling with the grammar and vocabulary. And they were like, should you maybe get some help with this translation? And I was like, okay. So I only went there to listen to their work and to understand. I do translate though from English and from Polish into Ukrainian, but that's a whole different thing. I'm not able. I mean, if I need, I can tell the story in any language, I suppose, using like pretty much everything. But my language is not a writer's language. So
maybe time for one more question if someone has one. Last brief question. If not, let me say that, Kateryna, in your video, you say that Ukrainian literature is cool, it's interesting, it's rich, and it's worth checking out. Given the evidence just from you in the video and today, I think we can all agree that how correct that statement is, and we all look forward to reading more of your work, following you as you continue to publish all these wonderful works in these different genres. And Kateryna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me and for organizing this meeting. And also, I'm here. I'm easily can be reached through social media, and I'm always up to talk about literature or inspiration in my broken English. And also, I'm always here up to answer any questions about Ukrainian literature, Ukrainian art, and Ukraine in general. As you have noticed, I love telling stories. So whenever you need some kind of story I can tell you, please let me know. And please check out the list I gave to you, because there are really cool books in it. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to meet you all.